She was 22, married to a man who barely noticed her. In the glass mansion overlooking New York, Olivia Carter moved like a polite shadow, wearing the ring of a CEO who treated their marriage like a line in a contract. No arguments, no passion, just silence. And a younger brother whose future depended on that silence never breaking. Until a trip to Miami, a blue bikini, and a furious stare from the shoreline began to crack the life she had traded herself for. And what happened after that day on the beach, no one could have predicted. If this story touches your heart at any moment, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Traveling to new hearts. The snow was still falling when Olivia Carter signed the contract that would change her life forever. Outside, Manhattan looked like a silent painting, with cars sliding slowly along the streets and lights reflecting on the glass walls of the minimalist office. But inside, everything in her was trembling. At 22, life was about to leave her behind. The document in front of her had more than 20 pages, small letters, cold terms, numbers that weighed like chains. Across the table, Logan Bennett watched everything with the expression of someone evaluating an investment proposal, not a woman who was literally selling her own freedom. He was 34, the CEO of one of the most influential real estate companies in the country, and he looked carved out of stone, flawless suit, rigid posture, analytical gaze. There was no cruelty in his voice, something worse instead. Professional indifference. "Did you read everything?" he asked, barely lifting his eyes. Olivia nodded, although the truth was different. Some parts she had read 2-3 times, others she had only skimmed while trying not to fall apart. Every line in that contract spoke about obligations, appearances, social events, and silence. Nothing there seemed to leave room for feelings, but she had no choice. Ryan, her younger brother, was in his 3rd year of medical school, a brilliant future ahead of him. But after their father's sudden death, a box of debt appeared like a starving monster, threatening to swallow everything: the house, his education, the stability they fought so hard to build. Their father, always too proud to ask for help, had taken out large loans to keep the family business afloat, and died owing more than he had lived. At 18, Ryan tried to drop out of college to work. Olivia didn't let him. She had dropped out of her design program instead, took 2 jobs, tried to negotiate the debts, tried to breathe. But when the collection company knocked on the door with legal threats, the air disappeared. That was when Richard Torres showed up. Logan's partner and mentor, a strategist, meticulous, the kind of man who saw opportunities even in ruins. When he discovered that Logan's reputation was being questioned by investors for being single, unstable, too free to lead such a serious conglomerate, he saw the perfect solution. A wife, someone elegant, young, discreet, a symbol of stability, and a desperate family needing salvation. Olivia became the answer to problems that weren't hers. "Your brother will have his entire college education paid for," Richard said in their first meeting, with a smile that was almost kind. "And your father's debts will be settled immediately. In return, you will become part of the image of a CEO who needs to appear appropriate." She remembered the moment Ryan, unaware of everything, hugged her that morning and said, "Liv, I can feel things are going to get better." He smiled with hope, and hope was something she didn't have the heart to destroy. So now, in that cold office, she held the pen with trembling hands. Logan closed his tablet and finally looked at her fully. He wasn't cruel, but he carried a distance that hurt. It felt like he looked through her, not at her, as if Olivia weren't a person, but an item in an agreement. "You don't need to be afraid," he said, perhaps trying to sound cordial. "You'll have security, comfort, stability. You will be treated with respect." She swallowed hard. "And will we be a couple?" The question slipped out softly, almost a breath. Logan blinked slowly, as if considering the answer the way he would consider a clause. "We will be what we need to be for the public, for my company, for the board." Then he looked away. "Anything else isn't necessary." Right then, Olivia understood. There would be no love, no attempt, not even real companionship. It would be like living with a stranger who controlled everything except her, because in a way, even that was written into the contract. She took a deep breath and signed the first page, then the second, the third. When she finished, it felt as if she had left a piece of herself in each line. Logan gathered the contract with a brief professional nod. "My assistant will contact you to arrange your move," he said as he stood up. "And welcome." There was no handshake, no smile, nothing resembling the beginning of a life together. Only the sound of the automatic door closing behind him. The move happened in 2 days. Black cars, silent drivers, boxes labeled with the same meticulous standard as Logan's life. The mansion was in one of New York's most expensive neighborhoods, with panoramic views, a modern facade, and a perfectly trimmed garden, but without flowers. It looked like a museum of success, not a home. When she stepped inside, Olivia felt the cold air, the echo of her footsteps, the neutral scent that told no story at all. It was like living inside a luxury catalogue. Logan kept exactly what he had promised. He was respectful, cordial, and distant. He slept in the master bedroom, she in the guest room. He spent more hours in the office than in the house, and when he was home, he walked through the halls with quiet, purposeful steps, like a visitor. "We have an agreement," he repeated whenever a topic touched anything intimate. "That is enough." And it should have been, but it wasn't. At night, with the city glowing outside, Olivia sat on her bed and made video calls with Ryan. He smiled as if she were living a fairy tale. "Liv, you look so good. Look at that place. It must be amazing." She smiled too, because the lie was lighter than the guilt. Inside, she felt hollow, as if she had traded her youth for a golden cage. The only real sound in the house came from Mrs. Lewis, the 62-year-old housekeeper who had lived there since Logan's youth. She was small, elegant, soft-spoken, but sharp-eyed. She noticed everything. She saw everything. "The house is used to silence," she told Olivia on the second day, offering her chamomile tea. "But maybe it's waiting for something different now." Olivia didn't know exactly what that meant, but she sensed there was wisdom there. Mrs. Lewis didn't talk much about Logan, but every now and then she let little pieces slip. The strict father, Richard's pressure, the belief that emotion was weakness. All of that made Logan not a monster, but someone shaped by a harsh world. Those small revelations planted a fragile, almost childish spark inside Olivia, hope that maybe there was a human being behind that cold mask. But time kept passing. Days kept falling away, and the mansion remained as silent as ever. Logan crossed the hall in a rush. She slipped into a side corridor. He served himself dinner without asking if she had eaten. She ate alone, staring at the view, pretending the emptiness wasn't crushing her. One night, while adjusting one of the glass vases in the living room, Olivia heard Logan talking to Richard on the phone. "She seems suitable," Logan said in an impersonal tone. "Discreet, calm. She'll work." Her chest tightened. Work. Like an accessory, an investment, a decorative piece in his life. But Olivia swallowed the pain. Her brother was studying. The debts were paid. The contract, the same one killing her a little each day, was what kept Ryan standing. She reminded herself of that every night, and that was what kept her from breaking down. This wasn't a wife's life, it was a ghost's life, an elegant ghost, as the magazines would say. And as she walked through the long hallway that night, feeling the cold floor beneath her feet, she silently asked herself for the first time, "How long can I keep living like this?" But the answer stayed suspended in the air of the mansion. And she had no idea yet that on the other side of that frozen life, a small crack was about to appear. Something almost invisible, but powerful enough to change everything. Logan Bennett's mansion was an architectural masterpiece, and at the same time, an emotional desert. Tall, glass-walled, built with clean lines and polished surfaces, it displayed its owner's success like a permanent trophy. But for Olivia, that place felt like something else entirely, like living inside silence. It was a thick silence, almost physical, not just the absence of sound, the absence of life. During the first few days, she tried to fill the space with small routines. She woke up early, walked along the balcony overlooking the Hudson, made herself coffee, even though the kitchen had more equipment than she could identify. But no matter what she did, the house remained unchanged, large, cold, impersonal. And Logan moved through those rooms as if he were in a private airport, always passing through, always headed somewhere, never really staying. He had 2 offices, the official one on the 30th floor of the company's headquarters and the informal one inside the mansion, a glass-walled room where he spent hours analyzing graphs, reports, contracts, mergers. Many times, Olivia would wake up at 3 in the morning to drink water and find the light in that office still on, his silhouette hunched over papers, completely unaware that someone else lived in the same house. It was like sharing a home with someone who was never actually there. As the days went by, Olivia began noticing the textures of the place. The white marble in the living room echoed her steps, reminding her with every movement how alone she was. The large windows let in a light that was too clean, too cold, almost surgical. The neutral tones of the furniture, grey, ivory, cream, seemed chosen specifically not to draw attention. The air smelled of cleanliness, not home. And in the late afternoon, when the shadows stretched across the hallways, she felt something she couldn't quite name, a deep melancholy, as if the space was slowly swallowing her. At 22, Olivia imagined she should be going out with friends, studying for exams, living lives that didn't require paperwork. Instead, she was in a mansion where not even her own husband asked whether she had eaten lunch. The contrast tore her apart. There were days when Logan came home late and had dinner alone, seated at the kitchen counter, looking at his tablet while he ate in silence. Often Olivia would come downstairs just to get a glass of water, and when he saw her, he would give her a polite nod, and nothing else. "Good night," he'd say, almost mechanically. She would answer, but the feeling was always the same, as if she were invisible. Other times, he arrived so exhausted that he didn't even come down to eat. He would go straight upstairs, pass by her without acknowledging her face, and lock himself inside the master bedroom. Olivia would stand in the hallway for a few seconds, trying to understand what kind of life this was supposed to be. In that marriage, Logan wasn't aggressive, nor violent, nor cruel. He was simply absent, a polite stranger. And that kind of absence day after day became a quieter pain than yelling, but much deeper. In the middle of all that emptiness, only one person seemed to truly see her, Mrs. Lewis. The 62-year-old housekeeper was a constant presence in the mansion. She walked with steady steps, spoke softly, moved with precise gestures. She was the opposite of the house, full of life, full of memories, full of humanity. She woke before sunrise to prepare Logan's favorite tea, which he often forgot to drink, and organized every detail of the household with a level of care that didn't match the corporate atmosphere they lived in. It was she who, on the 3rd day, knocked softly on the door of Olivia's room with a tray. "I thought you might want something warm," she said with a gentle smile. "Chamomile with honey. It helps calm the nerves." Olivia took the cup slowly. "Thank you, Mrs. Lewis." Call me Eleanor, dear," the woman replied. "No one needs so much formality in this house." The tea was warm and fragrant. For the first time in days, Olivia felt something close to comfort. Eleanor had the eyes of someone who had seen a lot. She observed more than she spoke, and when she did speak, she didn't waste words. One day, as they arranged flowers together in the living room, she said, "This house is used to darkness." Olivia lifted her eyes, surprised. Darkness? Not the kind you see? The other kind, the one you feel, Eleanor said, adjusting the petals of a white lily. Logan grew up here, but he never had much space to learn how to feel. Olivia stayed quiet, waiting without questioning. The housekeeper sighed, in a gesture full of years. His father was a hard man, one of those who believed love makes people soft, that emotions weaken you. And Richard took that to another level. They taught him that vulnerability is the enemy of success. Olivia absorbed the information slowly. So that's why he's so... She searched for the right word. Distant. Eleanor gave a small sideways smile, the kind that hides a sad truth. Distant is a kind way to put it. Logan learned to be invincible, and sometimes people who try to be invincible all the time forget how to be human. The words echoed inside Olivia. She leaned back on the couch, feeling something strange, a bit of compassion, a bit of sadness, a bit of identification. But none of that made the marriage less lonely. There were nights when Olivia couldn't sleep. The mansion was too big, too quiet. The city's noise arrived muted, filtered through double glass. The clock made a nearly irritating tick-tick sound. The sheets were soft but cold. She curled into bed and stared at the ceiling, imagining what her life would look like if she had chosen differently. Maybe she would be living in a small apartment, sharing a room with a college roommate, drinking cheap coffee, studying until late. Maybe she'd have less comfort, but she would have freedom. Sometimes she wondered if she would ever have the strength to get her life back once everything was over, or if she had already lost too much of herself along the way. The most painful thought, however, was always about Ryan. She pictured her brother walking through the hallways of medical school, unaware that his happiness came at the cost of hers. And every time that thought appeared, she remembered why she was there. That was what kept her standing. Over time, routine became habit, and habits, even sad ones, eventually grow roots. Olivia began keeping a schedule. She walked through the garden in the morning, read a little after lunch, helped Eleanor with small details like arranging flowers or choosing napkins. At night, she watched old movies or tried drawing, though her lines no longer had the joy they once did. If Logan noticed anything different about her, he never showed it, and despite her attempts to stay busy, one uncomfortable feeling persisted. She did not belong there. Even harder was dealing with the emotional unpredictability of sharing a home with someone so cold. His presence was like a shadow. It made no sound, but shifted the atmosphere of the entire house. When he arrived, the staff grew alert. Eleanor became serious. Even the air seemed to pause. Olivia noticed even her breathing changed. One day, as she walked through the library, a huge room with dark wooden shelves and the smell of new books, she found an old notebook forgotten in a box. It belonged to Logan. It was a sketchbook, simple drawings made when he was a child. A house, a tree, a dog, then pages of careful handwriting, small texts written in slightly shaky pen strokes, and at the end, a sentence that made her lose her breath. "I don't want to grow up like my father." The handwriting was young, almost childish. Olivia closed the notebook slowly, feeling something she couldn't quite define. A part of her wanted to keep it, understand it. Another part wanted to put it back and never open it again. But when she returned it to the box, she realized her hands were trembling. That sentence lit a question inside her, one she didn't know how to answer. Who is Logan Bennett when no one is watching? There was no way to know, but the truth was that a small opening had been created, and behind it something was, very slowly, beginning to move. That morning, Olivia woke up with a strange feeling. It wasn't exactly hope, but it wasn't pure despair either. It was more like something inside her had decided to try one more time before giving up for good. The mansion was still silent, but the winter light coming through the bedroom window had a softer glow, almost welcoming. She lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sound of city traffic. She thought of Ryan, how he was probably already on his way to college, backpack slung over one shoulder, coffee rushed, head full of dreams. She wondered what he would say if he knew that his sister, at that very moment, was thinking about trying to get closer to her own husband, not out of love. There was no love there yet, but out of need. A need to feel less invisible. A need to give herself at least a chance to find out whether this marriage was just a contract, or if there was even a millimeter of humanity somewhere behind it. She took a deep breath. Decided. That night, she would do something different. The plan started in the kitchen. The mansion's kitchen was huge, with light stone countertops, state-of-the-art appliances, and a constant smell of coffee, even though almost no one ever stopped long enough to really enjoy it. Olivia walked in mid-morning, her hair pulled back in a messy bun and a piece of paper in her hand. On the paper, shaky handwriting, the notes she had just taken after listening, with almost religious focus, to Mrs. Lewis's explanation. "Is this really what you said?" Olivia asked, turning to the housekeeper. "Meyer lemon, vegetable broth, and that cheese. Freshly grated Parmesan," Eleanor finished, a playful light in her eyes. "And be careful not to overcook the rice. Risotto is not soup, my dear. It needs to hug the plate, not slide across it." Olivia let out a quiet laugh. There was something almost therapeutic about that conversation. "And you're sure that he liked this?" she asked, trying to sound casual and failing. Eleanor leaned lightly against the counter, reaching back into a distant memory. "When Logan was a boy, his mother used to make this risotto on Sunday nights. It was the only time the house felt a little less rigid. He'd go for seconds, sometimes thirds." She gave a wistful little smile. "It's been a long time since he's had one made at home." There was tenderness in her voice, and a kind of longing, too. Olivia felt a knot in her throat. She didn't know that side of Logan's story. Not the boy, not the son, only the CEO, only the man who repeated, "We have an agreement," like he was closing a deal. Maybe that risotto was more than just a dish. Maybe it was a chance to pierce, even for a moment, the armor he'd been wearing for years. "Then let's do it right," she murmured, tying on an apron. "Even if I burn 2 pans trying." Eleanor smiled, this time more openly. "I'll stay nearby, but today you're the one cooking." The next few hours were organized chaos. Olivia got twisted up with the pans, messed up the amount of broth twice, and almost gave up when the rice started to threaten sticking to the bottom. But Eleanor, patient, guided her calmly. "A little more broth. Stir gently. That's it. Feel the texture. Don't rush it." The smell of risotto began to fill the kitchen. Lemon, butter, white wine, and something that smelled like comfort, like home. While the risotto finished cooking, Olivia ran upstairs to her room. She opened the wardrobe and let her fingers slide over the fabrics. She could pick any dress. There were dozens, from rushed shopping trips arranged by Logan's assistant before the wedding. But that night, she didn't want to look like a mannequin. She wanted something that reminded her of herself. She chose a green silk dress with thin straps, one that brought out the color of her eyes and left her back slightly bare. She let her hair down, soft waves falling over her shoulders. She put on light makeup, just enough to soften her tiredness and bring a little light back to her gaze. When she looked in the mirror, she recognized something she hadn't seen in months, a woman who was alive, not just a decorative piece. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. She wasn't sure if she was talking about the evening or her life. At 7:30, she went down to the main dining room. Not the casual space where they usually left meals ready and cooling for him to grab whenever he felt like it. The big dining room with a long table, crystal chandelier, heavy curtains, and the feel of a formal dinner. With Eleanor's help, Olivia set the table as if she were staging a scene from a movie. A flawless white tablecloth, porcelain plates perfectly aligned, silverware shining under the reflection of candles she insisted on lighting, even with the mansion's built-in ceiling lights. Wine glasses set in pairs, a small arrangement of white flowers in the center of the table, discreet but delicate. In the background, she put on soft jazz, the kind that fills the room without intruding. She dimmed the lights to something warmer, less clinical. For the first time, the dining room looked like a place where a couple might actually spend an evening together. The risotto rested, covered, in the kitchen, sending out an inviting aroma. A bottle of red wine was open, breathing in the decanter. Everything was ready, only he was missing. At 8 sharp, Olivia sat at the head of the table, hands resting in her lap, fingers intertwined to hide the nerves. The clock marked every second with cruel precision. 8:05, 8:15, 8:20. She heard the distant sound of the private elevator, footsteps upstairs, his voice muffled, talking on the phone. Relief. He was home. Olivia stood up and smoothed her dress, drawing in a deep breath. He'll come down. It's just a matter of minutes, she tried to reassure herself. 8:30, 8:40. The risotto was beginning to cool. Eleanor appeared discreetly in the doorway to the kitchen, a worried look in her eyes, but said nothing. She just measured the temperature of the situation with the same care she used to check the rice. Maybe he's just finishing up an important call, Olivia said, more to herself than to the housekeeper. I can reheat the risotto. Eleanor simply nodded, respecting the young woman's effort to hang on to hope. 9 o'clock. The candles had already burned halfway down. The jazz sounded like it was playing the same melody over and over, as if time itself had gotten stuck. 9:20. The brightness in Olivia's eyes was fading now. Her gaze was fixed on the doorway, as if she could make him appear by sheer will. 9:50. She no longer knew if she was hungry, tired, or just ashamed of herself. The smell of the risotto, once comforting, was starting to feel sickening. 10 o'clock. That was when he walked in. The dining room door opened with a soft click. Logan appeared framed by the hallway light, still in his suit, tie slightly loosened, face serious. But he wasn't alone. He was on the phone. "No, Richard, that doesn't fall under the performance clause," he was saying, voice controlled but tense. "If the board wants to force that kind of condition, we'll have to review the entire participation structure." He walked without looking to either side, so immersed in the conversation that, for a moment, it was as if he didn't see the set table, the candles, the music, or Olivia. She stood up slowly. "Logan." He saw her. His eyes swept over the scene as if he were analyzing a chart. Risotto served, candles lit, wine in the decanter, jazz playing softly, green dress, loose hair. For 1 second, something undefinable passed through his gaze. Surprise? Discomfort? Exhaustion? It was hard to tell. "I'll call you back in 5 minutes," he said into the phone, hanging up without waiting for an answer. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. "You set this up?" he asked, motioning toward the table with his chin, as if it were some operational detail. Olivia felt her face grow hot. "Yes, I thought we could have dinner together tonight, just the two of us." She spoke calmly, but her fingers trembled slightly at her sides. Logan sighed, running a hand through his hair, visibly exhausted. "Olivia, I've had back-to-back meetings all day. The merger is at a critical stage. Richard is pushing for changes I can't accept. He shook his head, like he was trying to refocus on what really mattered. "I don't have time for dinners right now." She swallowed hard. "It's not just about dinner. It's about us." The word us hung in the air, foreign in a house where there had only ever been him and the company. Logan's brow creased slightly. "We have an agreement," he replied, as if that summed up everything. "And the agreement doesn't require this kind of—" He searched for the word, not realizing how heavy it would be. Performance. The silence turned into a punch. Performance. That dress, the food, the table, the candles, the attempt to build a moment. All of it to him looked like unnecessary theater. Olivia felt something inside her crack. Not with a loud snap, but with a quiet fissure, like ice splitting from the inside. She tried to keep her voice even. "Logan, I just wanted—" She stopped, bit her lip, took a breath. "I just wanted at least once for it to feel like we're a real couple, even if it was only for one night." He looked away, tugging slightly at his tie, like he was suffocating under anything that slipped out of his control. "That wasn't part of the contract, Olivia." The words weren't spoken with sarcasm or open cruelty. In his mind, they were just a fact. But to her, they sounded like a sentence. Behind her, one of the candles cracked, spilling a thin line of melted wax onto the white tablecloth. The clock on the wall read 10:05. The jazz kept playing, oblivious to everything. "I understand," she murmured at last. And she did, completely. She understood that to him, at that point, she was still nothing more than a piece of strategy, a calculation, a functional element in a public image. Logan looked down at his phone, which started vibrating again, Richard's name glowing on the screen. "I have to take this," he said, already turning away. "Ask the staff to put away whatever can be saved. Don't let it go to waste." And he went back upstairs toward his office, taking with him the sound of his quick footsteps and yet another call that once again seemed to matter more than anything else. Olivia stayed where she was, in the middle of the room. The candles flickered, casting dancing shadows along the walls. She looked at the risotto, now hardening at the edges of the plate, at the untouched wine, the flowers, the neatly placed cutlery, at the empty chair across from her, and for the first time she didn't cry. The pain was too big to turn into tears. She sat down slowly, picked up the folded napkin from the plate, laid it over her lap, and mechanically took the first bite of the risotto she had made herself. It tasted good, almost perfect, but inside her, something was dying in complete silence, and as she chewed slowly, alone at a table set for two, a question began to form. Insistent, but still without a voice. If even my attempt to get closer is treated like a performance, what's left that's real in this marriage? She didn't know, not yet. But that night, without realizing it, Olivia Carter stopped trying to be seen and started, for the first time, seriously thinking about leaving. It wasn't a decision. Not yet. It was only the shadow of one, but it was there, sitting at the table with her, between the soft sound of jazz and the cold perfume of a dinner that would never become a happy memory. Morning sunlight was slipping through the glass walls of the mansion when Olivia woke up that Tuesday. The light was cold, almost bluish, illuminating the room in a way that didn't bring warmth. It just revealed, with cruel precision, the emptiness around her. She stayed there for a few minutes, lying down, listening to the huge silence that filled every corner of that house. In the last few days, that silence had grown heavier than ever. After the ruined dinner, or better, the ignored dinner, she hadn't been able to sleep. She spent hours sitting on the closet floor, her back against the wood, the green silk dress wrinkled beside her. She didn't cry. She just stayed there thinking. Her silence was louder than any argument. And something inside her had changed that night. Not in an explosive way, more like ice that after weeks frozen solid gives off that first, barely audible crack, the warning that it's going to break. That morning she could feel the fracture. She slipped into light linen pants, a soft blouse, and walked slowly down the stairs. The glass walls reflected her image, and for the first time, she felt strange looking at herself. She was pretty, elegant, but she looked like a misplaced character in the scene, as if she didn't belong to that life. In the kitchen, she found Eleanor making tea. "Good morning, dear," the housekeeper said with a gentle but perceptive smile. She always seemed to know when something was wrong. "Did you sleep well?" Olivia hesitated for a second, then answered, "I slept enough." Eleanor didn't push. She just placed a cup in front of her like someone offering shelter, but Olivia didn't touch the tea. Her gaze was far away, drifting out toward the window, where the reflection of the city outside seemed more alive than anything inside that house. After a few seconds, she said quietly, "I need to get out of here, Eleanor." The housekeeper lifted her eyes, surprised, but not shocked, as if she'd seen this coming long before Olivia put it into words. "Get out for a few hours, or for longer?" she asked carefully. "A few days," Olivia answered, tightening her hands in her lap. "Maybe a week. I need to breathe. I need to remember who I am." Eleanor set the cup down slowly. "Sometimes a house holds you more with its silence than with its walls," she said with almost maternal calm. "And you've been very strong here, darling. Too strong even." Those words squeezed Olivia's chest. For a moment, she considered telling her about the ignored dinner, the dress, the risotto, the candles, but it still hurt too much to turn into words, so she just nodded. And in that simple gesture, she made the first decision that was truly hers since she had entered that mansion. Logan was in the breakfast room, the glass-walled space he used as a second office. The table was covered with folders, notes, an open tablet full of graphs, and a cup of coffee he would probably forget to finish. He was so immersed in spreadsheets that he didn't notice when Olivia walked in, not until her shadow cut through the morning light. He looked up, not slowly, not abruptly, just enough to recognize her. That steady blue gaze landed on her face, trying to read something, but not very deeply. "Good morning," he said, voice low and distant. "Do you need something?" Yes, she did, but not coffee, not breakfast, not anything that house could offer. She needed herself. And that no longer fit inside those walls. Olivia took a breath and held onto her courage, like someone holds a fragile piece of crystal. "Logan, I wanted to talk to you about a trip." He raised an eyebrow, closing the tablet with an automatic motion. "A trip?" She nodded. "I want to go to Miami for a few days." Logan leaned back slightly in his chair. It wasn't exactly surprise, it was analysis. He was looking at her like he was calculating an impact, a cost, a variable. "Miami?" he repeated, as if testing the word. "Any specific reason?" "I have a friend there, Jenna." Olivia's voice stayed steady, even with her heart racing. "I want to visit her. I want a change of scenery for a while." Logan's brow creased slightly. "You want to travel alone?" "Yes." He studied her face for a few seconds. Long seconds. You could almost see the inner gears turning. Public image, stability, appearance of a solid marriage. All of it starting to rearrange in his mind. And then he saw it. He didn't know how to read emotions very well, but he saw. The dark circles blurred under makeup, the pale skin, the dimmed eyes, her youth slipping through her fingers, the quiet exhaustion. And even if for the wrong reasons, his mind made the connection. Richard always said a worn-out-looking wife damaged the image. Was that what Logan was seeing? Or deep down, did he see something more? Something that bothered him in a way he didn't know how to name? "How long?" he asked finally in a neutral tone. "I'm not sure yet. Maybe 4 or 5 days. Maybe a week." Logan drew in a breath, resting his hands on the table. He seemed unsettled. And not because of the trip itself, but because for the first time Olivia wasn't asking for permission. She was stating a decision. Her decision. Something he didn't control, so he answered, "All right, go," then added, "Ask my assistant to arrange the tickets, hotel. All expenses will be reimbursed." Olivia blinked, surprised at how easily he agreed. "No, there's no need to book a hotel. I'll stay at my friend's place." His jaw tightened just a little, a small sign of discomfort he probably didn't notice himself, but he only nodded. "As you wish." The conversation could have ended there. But when Olivia turned to leave, he called out, "Olivia?" She stopped. She didn't turn all the way back, just turned her head enough to see him from the side. "Yes?" Logan watched her for a moment that was too long to be simple courtesy. But, as always, when he was about to say something personal, he aborted halfway. "Be careful. That's all." She stood there for a second, frozen, maybe waiting for a question, maybe hoping for a why, maybe wishing he'd say stay. But he said nothing else. So she answered, "I'm always careful." But inside, something whispered, "I'm going because I don't want to disappear inside this house anymore." By late afternoon, while she packed her suitcase, Olivia felt a mix of anxiety and freedom. She folded light clothes, old bikinis she hadn't worn since college, a white dress Ryan always loved to see her in, skincare products, and a sketchbook that had been closed for months. Every item she placed in the suitcase felt like a piece of her old life being returned. Eleanor walked into the room to drop off fresh towels and stood there for a few seconds, watching, her eyes a little watery but proud. "You're making the best choice you can right now, dear," she said. "Sometimes to keep going, we need to breathe far away from what's suffocating us." Olivia smiled, a small smile, but real. "Thank you for everything, Eleanor." "Don't thank me yet," the housekeeper replied, adjusting the suitcase handle. "Thank me when you come back, a little more, you." By the end of the day, when she crossed the mansion's threshold with the suitcase rolling behind her, Olivia felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Air. Not just air, breath, life. The driver opened the car door, and she got in. As the car pulled away from the mansion, she saw the tall glass building from the outside for the very first time, and had the strange feeling that she wasn't just leaving a house behind, but an entire version of herself. And as the city streaked past the window, lights, buildings, people, movement, Olivia Carter realized she was heading straight toward the unknown, and toward a part of herself that had been forgotten, the part that still wanted to live. But she had no idea, none, that on the other side of that trip something much bigger was waiting, something that neither Logan nor her nor anyone else could ever have predicted. The plane landed in Miami a little after 10 in the morning, and the warm, humid air rushed in the moment Olivia stepped out of the aircraft. It felt like entering another world, a world that stood in brutal contrast to the glass mansion she'd left behind in New York. The sun was brighter. The air smelled like the ocean. People talked loudly, laughed loudly, gestured freely. Everything seemed overwhelmingly alive. And Olivia, after months of living in silence, felt her chest open as if she were breathing for the first time. In the arrivals hall, she spotted Jenna practically launching herself through the crowd. "Liv!" her friend screamed, running toward her and pulling her into a hug so tight it nearly knocked the air out of her. "My God, look at you. You look like a chic doll straight out of an editorial. I want to punch you just for that." Olivia laughed, a real laugh, loose, almost forgotten. "You haven't changed," she said, shaking her head, emotional. "And you've changed way too much," Jenna replied, pulling back just enough to study her face. "You're prettier, but also—" She narrowed her eyes. "Tired, and I'm not letting that continue. We're fixing it right now." Olivia gave a small but genuine smile. "You've always been dramatic, and you've always been too kind, which puts you in colossal trouble. Now come on," she said, grabbing the suitcase with one hand. "Get ready for days full of sunshine, good food, and forbidden gossip." Jenna lived in Coconut Grove, one of the city's most charming neighborhoods, lined with trees, cozy cafes, and homes with flowered balconies. The street she lived on looked straight out of a romantic movie. Birds singing, people walking their dogs, bikes passing slowly. When Olivia stepped inside her house, something nearly brought her to tears. It smelled like home. A real home, with colourful pillows, real plants, slightly crooked frames no one bothered to straighten. "Lie down," Jenna commanded, pointing to the couch. "I'm making iced coffee, and you're telling me everything." Olivia collapsed onto the sofa, sinking into the soft fabric. Simple, warm, comforting. The exact opposite of the calculated coldness of Logan's mansion. Here, she kicked off her shoes, tucked her legs up, and relaxed in a way she hadn't in months. And she talked. She shared part of what she was living, not everything, not the contract, not the details, but enough for Jenna to understand there was pain. Her friend listened in silence for long minutes, then concluded, "Liv, you're fading in that place." Olivia didn't answer, because she knew. "Then we're bringing you back," Jenna said, with that natural leader spark she'd always had. "Tomorrow there's a private launch event for a new beachwear brand at South Beach. Super exclusive, but I have access. You're coming with me, and you're wearing a bikini, and I am not accepting no." Olivia was about to refuse, but Jenna gave her that look that ended all debates. "You're going," she insisted. "Not so others can see you, but so you can see you." Those words hit Olivia in the deepest place inside her. The next day the city was drenched in sunlight, everything painted with a golden sheen. The streets were buzzing with tourists. The air smelled like sunscreen, salt, and tropical fruit. Jenna burst into Olivia's room holding several bikinis, tossing them onto the bed. "Pick one." Olivia sifted through the pile, pink, yellow, floral, until her fingers brushed against soft fabric, a deep, bright blue. Atlantic blue, freedom blue, simple, elegant, cinching at the waist, flattering the shoulders, and something she hadn't worn in a very, very long time. In the mirror, when she put it on, she saw something unexpected. She saw light. Jenna whistled. "Liv, for the love of God. This bikini should be illegal in this country." Olivia laughed, embarrassed. But deep down, she liked what she saw. For the first time in months, she didn't look dim. She looked like a woman. The event took place on a private beach in front of a 5-star hotel. White tents, soft music, tables with fresh fruit, models walking gracefully, photographers everywhere. The ocean behind them was so intensely blue it looked painted. Olivia walked along the sand, her feet sinking gently. The warm wind played with her hair, and the sun hit her skin like an embrace she didn't know she needed. Jenna was in her element, chatting with acquaintances, introducing Olivia proudly. "This is my gorgeous friend from New York who came here to escape her life. I love dramatic decisions," she said, making people laugh. And for the first time, Olivia laughed with them. Then she heard a voice behind her. "Excuse me," someone said, with a professional but kind tone. "May I?" She turned. A photographer, light brown hair pulled into a loose, modern bun, a concentrated yet gentle expression, attentive eyes, a badge on his lanyard, Liam Foster, photography team, Ingrid Ryan Resort. He held a large camera, but not pointed at her, just resting by his side. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, a bit shy. "You were walking, and I noticed the way the light was hitting you. It's perfect for the collection's mood board. The blue, the sun, it's exactly what Ingrid described." Olivia blinked, confused. "Mood board? Yes," he said, smiling softly. "An internal reference. Not for official advertising. You don't have to pose. Just walk, look at the ocean. You have an elegant melancholy." Elegant melancholy. Not an object, not a contractual wife, not invisible, elegant melancholy. Something warm bloomed in her chest. "If you're comfortable, of course," Liam added quickly, raising his hands in respect. "If you say no, I'll leave right away." Olivia looked at Jenna, who was already grinning, like she could see the entire universe unfolding. "Liv, you have to do this. Look at this man. He speaks beautifully, respects boundaries, and appreciates aesthetics, a rare species." Olivia laughed and said, "All right, just tell me what to do." "Nothing," Liam said, with the gentlest honesty she'd ever heard. "Just be yourself, the way you were before I appeared." And she was. She walked along the sand, let the wind touch her hair, closed her eyes against the sun, smiled sometimes, adjusted her bikini, looked at the horizon. Liam photographed without intruding, without over-directing, just capturing. "That's it," he murmured softly. "Perfect. One more step. Look up. Yes, you have something in your eyes, something beautiful. Beautiful. Not useful, not convenient. Beautiful." The sensation was so unexpected she swallowed hard. And in the middle of that brief improvised photo shoot, Olivia felt something she hadn't felt since before the marriage. She felt seen. Not as part of an arrangement, not as an accessory, not as someone fading beside a powerful man, seen as a woman. After the photos, Liam thanked her with a kindness that bordered on shy. "You saved my day," he said. "And I hope you had a little fun too." She smiled, softly, genuinely. "Yes, I think I did." Jenna, of course, hijacked the conversation, asking about the collection, about Ingrid, about the event. But Olivia's mind was on the ocean, on the sun, on the blue bikini, and on the fact that being there didn't hurt. The day passed quickly. They stayed until late afternoon, laughing, taking pictures together, eating chilled fruit, walking along the warm water. It was simple, but it was life. And when the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Olivia felt like she was learning how to exist again. She had no idea what would come next. No idea that someone was watching her from afar. No idea that this moment, so light and so beautiful, would become the spark that would ignite the man she left in New York. But that revelation was still coming. For now, there was only the warm breeze, the sound of the ocean, and the long-forgotten feeling of being alive. The Miami heat felt like it belonged to another planet for someone used to the chilled glass of New York. Logan Bennett felt the warm air hit his face the moment the car door opened in front of the 5-star hotel in South Beach. The driver held the door. He stepped out, adjusted his tie, and within seconds his phone was already in his hand, checking emails, notifications, reports. Everything about this trip had been arranged at the last minute. A real estate investment meeting with a group of international partners, negotiation dinners, a possible portfolio expansion. Work. Always work. That was how he operated. That was the only way he knew how to exist. But that morning, something slipped out of his control. The main meeting was cancelled. One of the investors had a health issue, and the meeting was postponed indefinitely. The other commitments were rescheduled. Suddenly, Logan had something rare in his calendar. A few free hours, which for most people might mean rest. But for him it was an inconvenience. Free time meant room to think, and thinking was dangerous. He went up to the suite, took off his jacket, loosened his collar, and stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, staring at the beach below. From a distance, he could make out umbrellas, people walking, kids running to the shoreline. The muffled sound of the ocean reached him like a constant hum. It was strange. He knew Olivia was in the same city. Knew she was with a friend, knew it was just a few days, and yet the fact that they were so close made him restless in a way he couldn't explain, even to himself. He tried going back to the spreadsheet open on his laptop, tried replying to emails, tried mentally reorganizing his next meetings, but something was bothering him, like static in the background. Then his phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. "Mr. Bennett, as per your authorization, I'm charging Mrs. Bennett's expenses to the corporate support card. One of them is for a beachwear event at the hotel where you're staying, on the private beach area. Would you like me to categorize it as personal image?" Logan read the message twice. Beachwear event. At the hotel where you're staying. Private beach area. He felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't reason. It wasn't logic. It was pure sensation. Without thinking, he replied simply, "Yes, categorize as personal." But instead of ending it there, he stayed frozen, staring at the phone. An image rose in his mind, uninvited. Olivia, in that mansion, always so contained, so dimmed, now at a beachwear event. Among models, among cameras, among people who would probably see her far more than he had in months. The discomfort grew into something bigger, hotter, darker. Before he could rationalize it, he was already grabbing his jacket again. He didn't change clothes, didn't remove his tie. He went down exactly as he was. Dark suit, closed expression, determined steps. He didn't admit to himself that he was going after her. He told his brain he just wanted to check if everything was okay. But his racing heart betrayed a truth he wasn't ready to face. The private beach area was just behind the hotel, accessible through a wide hallway and a staircase that led to the sand. As he went down, the sound of the ocean grew louder, mixing with ambient music, laughter, and the rapid clicking of cameras. The scene looked like a live magazine spread. White tents, tables with light linens fluttering in the breeze, waiters circulating with trays of cold drinks, models walking along the sand, designers talking with tablets in hand. And in the center of it all, an elegant, relaxed mood, typical of luxury beachfront events. Logan walked through it all with his usual posture, shoulders squared, chin up, focused eyes. But inside, with every step, there was a sharp pulse of something he didn't understand, something already too strong to ignore. He saw her before he realized he was looking for her. Olivia stood near the water, just a few meters from where the waves broke and slid back, leaving the sand shining. The blue bikini framed her body with discreet elegance. Nothing vulgar, but undeniably feminine, luminous. Her hair fell loose, dancing in the wind, and the sun drew a glow across her skin. She was laughing, a light, genuine laugh, the kind he had never heard inside their own house. Liam was there too, camera in hand, guiding her gently. "That's it, Olivia. Look to the side. Perfect." His voice was low, unobtrusive, respectful. "When you look at the horizon like that, it feels like you're about to start your whole life over." Logan stopped. For a second, his world narrowed. He didn't hear the waves anymore, didn't see the other people, didn't feel the heat of the sun. There was only that image. The woman he had treated like a contractual detail, glowing in front of a stranger, smiling for a stranger, allowing herself to exist in a way she had never existed near him. Something inside Logan snapped. It wasn't mature love. It wasn't conscious longing. It was a primitive, fierce jealousy, far from anything rational. It was as if, all of a sudden, the asset he believed was under his control had turned into something far too free and far too desired by other eyes. He crossed the sand in a straight line. A few people stared, puzzled at the sight of a man in a dark suit striding through a sea of bikinis, swim trunks, and light dresses. He didn't notice the looks. The wind tugged at his jacket. Sweat started to form at his collar, under his shirt. He felt none of it. He only saw Olivia. And she only noticed him when his shadow blocked the sun in front of her. "What do you think you're doing?" His voice came out low and intense, loaded with such tightly held anger that it was even more dangerous for being contained. Olivia turned slowly. For a moment her world froze too. Seeing Logan there, in the middle of the sand and sea, in that absurd suit under the scorching sun, felt surreal. He looked completely out of place in that scene, and at the same time, painfully real. Like a living reminder of everything she'd tried to leave behind for a few days. His eyes swept down her body, the bikini, the droplets of water on her skin, then traveled back up to her face. There was no admiration in his gaze. There was possession, accusation. Liam stepped back a bit startled. We were just taking a few shots for Ingrid's mood board, he explained calmly. Nothing commercial, nothing inappropriate. Logan didn't even look at him. I wasn't talking to you, he said, his eyes never leaving Olivia's. She felt her blood boil. Logan, what are you doing here? She asked, fighting to hold on to what little rationality she had left. The question isn't what I'm doing here, he shot back, moving closer. The question is, what are you doing here, like this, with him, exposing yourself like this in public? Olivia felt a blend of shame and indignation. Shame, because dozens of eyes were starting to turn toward them. Indignation, because he was talking to her like she belonged to him. I'm living, Logan, she answered, steady. That's all. Living. Something I'm not able to do in that mansion. He let out a short, bitter laugh. Living? You call this living? Being photographed in a bikini for a bunch of strangers to stare at, judge, desire? The air seemed to grow heavier around them. Liam, sensing the tension, raised his hands slightly in peace. Olivia, if you want, we can stop here. I don't want to cause any trouble. I think stopping here is an excellent idea, Logan cut in. This time Liam looked him straight in the eye. With all due respect, sir, that's her decision. That tiny detail, it's her decision, lit something inside Olivia. She looked at Liam, then at Logan. Suddenly, she understood the size of that moment. Everything she'd been swallowing since the ruined dinner, the cold nights in the mansion, the contract signed in desperation. All of it started to rise. Don't worry, Liam, she said, offering him a tired but firm smile. I've got this. He nodded, stepping back to give them space, but not leaving entirely. The camera still hung from his hand. He watched, alert, ready to step in if a line was crossed. Olivia then stepped closer to Logan until they were only inches apart. The contrast between them was brutal. He in a dark suit, fury in his features, she in a blue bikini, sun-kissed skin, eyes full of something he had never seen so clearly before. You want to know what I'm doing here? She asked, her voice low but sharp as a blade. I'm breathing. I'm remembering what it feels like to feel the sun, the ocean, the wind, without that house collapsing on my shoulders. I'm trying to be a little bit of the woman I was before you put me in a glass showcase. His eyes narrowed. I gave you security, comfort, stability. You gave me silence, Olivia shot back without hesitation. You gave me a marriage where I don't exist, where I'm treated like a clause. You walk past me in the hallways like I'm part of the furniture. And now that I'm here, laughing, being myself for 5 minutes, you cross the beach in a suit to rip that away from me? Her words hit their mark. For the first time, Logan felt like he was losing something he had never even admitted to owning. You're my wife, he replied, jealousy dripping from the word. And you think this kind of exposure is acceptable? This level of intimacy with a stranger? You don't talk to me about intimacy, she cut in, her voice trembling with emotion. You don't know what that is. You don't know what it means to look at someone and truly be seen. Silence dropped over them, heavy and electric. The waves rolled in and out, indifferent. The wind kept blowing, but around them the air felt like it had stopped. She drew a breath and continued. The truth, Logan, is that the first person to see me as a woman in months wasn't you. It was a photographer doing his job. He didn't try to own me, didn't try to control me. He just said I told a story. In all these months you never wanted to hear that story. His jaw tightened. You're overreacting. Her laugh came out short and disbelieving. Overreacting? I prepared an entire dinner for you, in our house. I wore a dress, cooked the dish you loved when you were a kid, set the table like we were a real couple. You showed up 2 hours late on the phone with your partner, looked at all of that like it was an annoyance, and went upstairs saying you didn't have time for performances. The memory slapped him. He remembered the scene, remembered her eyes, remembered the candles, the table, something that had bothered him and that he'd shoved into the corner of his mind. I was under enormous pressure, Olivia. You know how the board is, how the numbers are. I couldn't— No, she interrupted again, firmer. You couldn't feel, that's it. You couldn't admit that something there might be real, so you treated it like theatre, as if I were an actress trying to steal your attention. And now, here you are again, acting like my life only exists within what you approve or disapprove. He took a step closer. I will not accept my wife being exposed. Your wife is not your property, she fired back, cutting him off. And if you can't understand that, then maybe we need to reevaluate what this agreement even means. Because I signed that contract to save Ryan's future, not to bury mine. Her words hung in the air like a silent ultimatum. From a distance, in the shade of an elegant beach umbrella, a woman watched the scene. Ingrid Ryan. Light dress, sunglasses, impeccable posture. Beside her, an assistant commented on something about the models, but Ingrid wasn't listening anymore. Her eyes were locked on Olivia, on the strength in her voice, on the way she stayed standing, even while being hit by a public jealous outburst. She saw pain, she saw dignity, she saw a story. And in that instant, Ingrid made a decision without saying a word. That woman would be the new face of her brand. She didn't want just the blue bikini. She wanted the narrative. She wanted the fight. She wanted the wounded elegance in Olivia's eyes. Back on the sand, Olivia took a step back. I'm not going to argue with you in the middle of a beach, Logan, she said firmly, but I won't apologize for being alive. She turned her back on him. Every step she took toward the tent, toward the sea, toward her newly rediscovered freedom, was a cut across Logan's pride. He stood there, watching his wife walk away, watching her leave him, shining brighter than she ever had at his side. And for the first time, silence didn't protect him. Silence swallowed him. He didn't know it yet, but that outburst of jealousy, ridiculous and out of control under the Miami sun, had just lit a fuse that would change everything. Not just for him, not just for her, but for the entire contract holding up that life of appearances. The light rain falling over New York that morning gave the city a metallic sheen. Droplets slid down the glass walls of Logan's mansion, forming small transparent rivers that distorted the distant skyline. Inside, the atmosphere was different, still, heavy, almost suspended. It had been a few days since Olivia came back from Miami. Ever since that scene on the beach, something between her and Logan had broken in a way that felt irreversible. Not through shouting, but through silence. A different silence than before. No longer a passive emptiness, but a silence full of unsaid things, full of choices on the verge of being made. He returned to New York a day after her, but seemed even more distant. He spent hours locked in his office, door closed, his voice sometimes rising in heated discussions with Richard, sometimes dropping into strategic murmurs. When they crossed paths in the hallways, eye contact lasted barely more than a second. There was tension in the air, not acknowledged, not confronted, but undeniable. Olivia, for her part, walked through the house differently. She was no longer the elegant shadow willing to disappear into glass walls. There was something new in her steps. A calm firmness, a kind of awareness, as if she had finally understood that, contract or not, her life still belonged to her. But even with this new clarity, the weight of the agreement was still there. Ryan's future was still tied to the paper she had signed. Guilt still followed her like a quiet shadow, especially at night, when the lights went out and only the memory of the paid debts seemed to glow in her mind. That particular morning she was in the library, staring at the shelves without really seeing the titles. She held an open book in her hands, but her thoughts were somewhere else. The smell of paper, wood, and distant coffee wrapped around thoughts of her brother, of the ruined dinner, of the jealous outburst in Miami. She could still hear her own voice saying, "I'm not going to apologize for being alive." That echo held her up. Then Eleanor appeared in the doorway, as composed as ever, but with a different glint in her eyes. "Olivia, dear," she said, her voice soft but carrying a quiet importance. "There's a lady here to see you. She asked to speak with you personally." "With me?" Olivia frowned. "Not Logan?" "No. She asked for you." A small pause. "Ingrid Ryan." Olivia's heart jumped so hard she had to take a second just to breathe again. Ingrid Ryan, the owner of the resort wear label from the Miami event. The woman who, with her effortless elegance, seemed to belong to a different universe. "She's here?" Olivia repeated, still stunned. "In the sitting room," Eleanor confirmed. "And if you want advice from someone who's seen a lot in this life, don't keep a woman like her waiting for too long." There was humor and seriousness in the same sentence. Olivia closed the book slowly, took a deep breath, and straightened her blouse. She walked down the hallway, feeling the wooden floor under her bare feet, the faint perfume of the house mixing with the smell of rain drifting in through the gaps. Every step felt like it was taking her closer to a turning point she couldn't yet name. Ingrid Ryan was standing near the window in the sitting room, watching the rain-soaked garden. She wore a light-colored suit, simple and impeccable, standing out against the grey day outside. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a low bun, and thin-framed glasses rested on her nose, giving her an even more analytical air. She turned when she heard footsteps. "Olivia," she said, with a discreet but genuine smile. "Thank you for seeing me." Her voice was steady, confident, but there was a respectful gentleness in it. Olivia felt a flicker of self-consciousness. Suddenly, the mansion, so intimidating to her, seemed small beside this woman's presence. "I should be the one thanking you for coming," she replied, not bothering to hide her surprise. "I had no idea that you knew where you lived," Ingrid finished, matter of fact. "When someone interests me professionally, I do my research. It's part of the job." There was no threat in the statement, just truth. They sat down. Ingrid crossed her legs with effortless poise, resting a folder on her lap. Olivia kept her hands clasped together, trying to steady her nerves. "I'll be direct," Ingrid began, fixing a focused gaze on her. "I saw what happened in Miami." Heat rushed to Olivia's face. The humiliation came back in flashes, the dark suit in the sand, his tone of voice, the curious stares, the urge to disappear. I'm sorry about that," she murmured. "I hope it didn't disrupt your event." Ingrid made a small flick of her hand, as if brushing away something unimportant. "On the contrary," she leaned forward slightly. "It was the most genuine moment of the entire afternoon." Olivia blinked, confused. "Genuine." "Most of the people at that event were playing a part," Ingrid explained. "Influencers posing, models obsessed with angles, executives trying to look more relaxed than they've ever been in their lives. It was all a very polished performance." She paused. "Except you." The words landed heavier than Olivia expected. "I saw a woman who was hurt, but still standing," Ingrid went on. "I saw dignity in the way you refused to lower your head, and I saw a fire in your eyes when you said you weren't going to apologize for being alive." Her tone softened, but remained resolute. "And that is exactly the kind of story I want for my next campaign." It took Olivia a few seconds to process. "Campaign?" she repeated, her voice unsteady. Ingrid opened the folder then, took out a few documents, and set them on the table between them. "I'm not here on a whim. I'm here with a proposal," she said. "I want you to be the face of the new summer collection for Ingrid Ryan Resort, not just as a model, but as an ambassador, someone who represents more than a body in a bikini, Someone who represents rebirth, independence, strength. Olivia's eyes widened. She looked from the papers back to Ingrid's face, as if waiting to find out this was a test, a joke, a misunderstanding. "I'm not a model," she whispered. "I've never done this. I don't even know where to start." "I saw you on that beach," Ingrid cut in gently, but leaving no room for false modesty. "The way you moved, the way you looked at the horizon. You have presence, and presence can't be taught. Technique, posture, expression, those we shape. But that story you carry in your eyes, no one can manufacture that." Olivia swallowed hard. "Why me?" she insisted. "You must know hundreds of professional models, women who are used to cameras, runways." Ingrid gave a small, sideways smile. "Exactly. They've learned how to pose. You've learned how to survive." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was thick, full of something that was beginning to fall into place. "I don't know if I can accept," Olivia said at last, guilt snapping back like a reflex. "My marriage, the agreement, Ryan, everything is so complicated." "I know more than you think," Ingrid replied calmly. "Maybe not every detail, but enough to understand you're not living in a fairy tale." She slid one of the documents closer to Olivia. It was a contract. But unlike the last one she had signed, this one carried a different kind of weight. "Read it slowly later," Ingrid said. "But I'll tell you the essentials now. High fee, participation in international campaigns, travel, and," she emphasized, "money going directly into your own account, clean, in your name. Enough to cover Ryan's tuition for many years, without anyone using that as a promise or leverage." Olivia's heart started pounding so hard she placed a hand against her chest. Ryan. All the nights she had thought of his face, of his exams, the late study sessions, all the times she'd wondered if she had the right to build her own freedom when his depended on that contract. All of it collided inside her in one single thought. I could free him without depending on Logan. "I want you to understand something," Ingrid went on. "I'm not here to buy your pain. I'm offering you a way to make it work for you instead of against you. You'll be paid for your time, your image, your story, and you'll have control. The lawyer will be yours, not mine. Nothing hidden, nothing buried in fine print." She leaned back in her chair, letting the weight of the offer sit between them. Olivia looked down at the pages, her fingers lightly tracing the edges. Unlike the first contract she had ever signed, this one didn't make her feel like she was selling herself. It made her feel like, for the first time, she might actually be choosing herself, but choice came with conflict. "Logan will never accept this," she murmured, more to herself than to Ingrid. "He barely coped with seeing me in a bikini on the beach. Imagine campaigns, photos, traveling. His image is his problem," Ingrid replied without hesitation. "Yours is yours." Then, after a brief pause, "Do you think you need his permission?" The question was a gentle blade, but precise. Olivia felt the heaviness of habit. The automatic answer almost slipped out. "Yes, of course, he's my husband, the contract." But something inside her pushed back. "I think I should tell him," she corrected calmly, "but not ask." Ingrid nodded, satisfied with the distinction. "Then do that. Don't rush. Think about it. Read everything carefully." She set a card on the table. "My lawyer, Daniel Brooks, will be at your disposal if you have questions. He's extremely competent and discreet." Oh. As soon as she heard the name, Olivia locked it into her memory like someone memorizing a lifeline. Daniel Brooks, her lawyer. For the first time, that sentence made sense. They talked a bit longer, scheduling details, timelines, possible dates for test shoots. When they said goodbye, Ingrid shook Olivia's hand firmly. "One more thing," she added, just before leaving. "Don't let anyone use your past against you. It's precisely the reason you'll go so far." Then she left, taking with her the faint trace of expensive perfume and the feeling that an elegant storm had just passed through the house. When the door shut, Olivia stayed alone in the room, the contracts on the table. The sound of rain against the glass suddenly seemed louder. She sat down slowly, picked up the first page, and started to read. Each clause opened a crack of possibility. She pictured Ryan in the future, graduating, wearing a white coat, his name on a badge. She pictured herself in photos, yes, but not as an object, as someone who had made a decision. She imagined a bank account that wasn't under Logan's control, not tied to an imposed agreement. This contract, unlike the other, felt less like a cage and more like a key. Even so, a shadow lingered in the background, Logan's reaction. She knew that once she told him, part of her new freedom would be tested, and that test came sooner than she expected. That night, a little after 8, Olivia went to his office. The door was slightly open, and she saw him alone at his desk, the lamplight carving sharp shadows into his features. His suit jacket was thrown over a chair. He wore only a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. There were dark circles under his eyes, tension in his jaw, exhaustion all over him. She knocked lightly. He looked up, closing the file on his computer. Olivia. Her name in his voice sounded different. Not cold. Not exactly warm. Somewhere in between. She stepped in, a folder in hand. We need to talk. The words put him on alert immediately. Logan leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers on the desk. About what? She came closer and set the folder in front of him, still standing. Today, Ingrid Ryan came here. His expression shifted. Ingrid Ryan? He repeated, surprised. The owner of the resort brand? The same, Olivia answered. She made me a job offer. Logan frowned, grabbing the contract and flipping through the first pages quickly. As he read, his expression hardened. Modeling, international campaigns, travel, you, everywhere, on display. He shut the contract with more force than necessary. No. The word sliced through the air. Olivia stared at him. No. No, he repeated more firmly. You're my wife. I can give you all of that and more without you having to put yourself out there like this. There's no need for you to work. Especially not like this. She took a deep breath, fighting back the urge to laugh at the irony. You've already given me everything? She asked with a dangerously calm tone. Because as far as I can tell, the person who gave me a chance at a future today was Ingrid, not you. He stood up, moving around the desk. I gave you security, Olivia. I paid off the debts, guaranteed your brother's future. In exchange for me. She finished without flinching. In exchange for my youth, my freedom, my life fit neatly into whatever works for you. I know exactly what you did, and I know exactly what I did. I accepted it. I signed. For Ryan, not for you. Her brother's name, in that context, changed the air between them. And now what? He snapped. You want to throw it all away? For what? Magazine covers? Parties? Flashes? Empty praise? No, she answered, steady. For autonomy. To look my brother in the eye and say, I paid for your future with my work, not with my silence. She stepped closer. And for me, because I refuse to keep living as a convenient clause in your public image. The silence between them grew heavy. Logan took a slow breath, trying to regain control. I won't allow it. His words came out quieter now, but laced with steel. This level of exposure could hurt the company. The investors, the board. Richard is already questioning the impact of your trip to Miami, a wife doing bikini shoots around the world. I'm not asking for your permission. The sentence left her mouth before she fully realized she was ready to say it. I'm informing you. He looked at her as if he'd just been struck. So that's how it is, he muttered. You know that if I want to, this contract doesn't happen. I have influence, connections I can... "You can try," she cut in, her voice low but steadier than it had ever been. "But if you do, I'll tell Ryan every detail of our arrangement, every line of that contract, every cent you paid, every word you used to turn our family's pain into a cold transaction." Logan's eyes flickered like someone taking a punch to the gut. She went on, "I've been protecting you from that weight until now. Protecting this image you like to have of yourself as the savior of my family. But I won't carry this guilt alone anymore. If you want to start a war, you'll have to do it with the whole truth out in the open." He said nothing. Her words echoed through the office like hammer blows. Logan knew very well what an admission like that could do, not only to their relationship but to Ryan's life, to public opinion if it ever leaked, to his own conscience. For the first time, he was truly cornered, not by a partner, not by an investor, not by a market rival, but by his own wife, or, more precisely, by the woman he had tried to reduce to a piece on his board. He lowered his gaze for a moment. "You would change the way your brother sees you, just to take this job?" he asked, as if there were still a chance to make her back down through emotional pressure. "I would change the way he sees the truth," she corrected. "I'm done protecting him from something that's going to overflow sooner or later, and I'd rather it come hand in hand with the news that I finally took my life back into my own hands." His breathing grew heavier. There was a long stretch in which only the distant sound of rain filled the room. Finally, Logan spoke, his voice rough with restraint. "Fine." He ran a hand through his hair, tension written all over him. "If you're determined to go through with this, I won't stand in your way." Olivia felt her heart pound harder, but didn't let euphoria show. She stayed firm. "But understand," he added, still trying to reclaim some ground, "I still don't believe this is what's best for you, or for us." She simply replied, "For the first time, what's best for me isn't going to be decided by you." He looked at her as if seeing a stranger, or maybe as if seeing the real her, the one he'd never allowed himself to recognize. She picked up the contract again, pressing it to her chest. "Ingrid said something today," she mentioned already at the door. "She told me not to let anyone use my past against me." "That's exactly what I'm doing now, Logan. I'm done using what happened as an excuse to accept anything." She left the office without waiting for a response. Behind her stayed the sound of rain, the desk piled with papers, and a man who was beginning for the first time to understand that losing control could hurt more than any financial result. Out in the hallway, contract in hand, Olivia felt her legs tremble slightly, not because she regretted anything, but because she knew that from here on, nothing would be the same. The mansion no longer seemed so big. The silence no longer felt as suffocating. For the first time, the glass walls looked like they might actually break. She took a deep breath, leaned her forehead against the cool window pane, and let the view of the rain-washed city blend with the idea of a new beginning. One contract had taken her freedom. Another was about to give it back, and even without knowing exactly where this path would lead, Olivia Carter knew that for the first time her next step would be taken out of choice, not desperation. And that difference changed everything. Olivia's first official photo shoot happened 2 weeks after Ingrid's visit to the mansion. The day started early. Clear sky, soft morning light, and that gentle coastal breeze typical of California, where the campaign would be shot. The studio was set on the cliffs of Malibu, overlooking the open ocean. One of those places that looked like it only existed in magazine editorials. Olivia arrived with a brand assistant and a driver sent by Ingrid. No black corporate cars, no intimidating figures. The energy there was completely different, creative, welcoming, vibrant. As soon as she stepped into the studio, she heard soft music, saw colorful fabrics being laid out, models chatting, makeup artists laughing, photographers arranging the scene. There was life, real life. And for the first time in a long time, Olivia felt like she was part of something bigger, not an accessory, not a decorative piece, but part of a movement. Liam was there. When he saw her, he smiled in that sincere, easy way that didn't demand anything from her. "Olivia." He walked over with the camera hanging around his neck. "Good to see you. Ready?" She smiled back. "I hope so. I'm still learning how to act naturally in front of a lens." "You don't need to act," Liam replied. "Just breathe." And that sentence made Olivia realize just how much she had forgotten how to do exactly that. While she was in the makeup chair, Ingrid arrived at the studio with her usual elegance. It wasn't arrogance, it was presence. She spoke to everyone by name, understood the process, weighed in only on what really mattered. When she reached Olivia, her eyes quietly evaluated every detail: posture, expression, nerves. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Nervous," Olivia admitted, laughing a little. "Good," Ingrid replied, snapping a color palette case shut. "People who get too comfortable with the extraordinary stop being extraordinary. Nerves keep you human, and that's what I want in the photos." She rested a hand on Olivia's shoulder. "Today, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Not to me, not to the world, only to yourself." The words felt like a discreet embrace. The shoot started on the beach, with Olivia wearing the new collection, flowing pieces, light fabrics, tones inspired by the ocean. Liam photographed with a kind of quiet sensitivity, capturing not perfect poses, but real moments. When the wind messed up her hair, when Olivia laughed unexpectedly, when she looked at the sea like she was reconnecting with something she'd lost. Ingrid watched from a distance, taking notes, analyzing details. But her expression made one thing clear. She had found exactly what she was looking for. By the time the session ended, the sun was already slipping behind the rocks. The whole team applauded Olivia, an instinctive, warm, genuine gesture. She smiled, moved, speechless. It was the first time in a long time that she felt proud of herself. In the days that followed, her name started to circulate in the fashion world, not as a celebrity, but as someone with presence, a woman who carried a story in her eyes. And in Ingrid's world, that was worth gold. Meetings started to appear, invitations for smaller campaigns, approaches for collaborations. Every new opportunity came with contracts carefully reviewed by Daniel Brooks, the lawyer Ingrid had recommended. He was discreet, calm, and extremely professional. In their first meeting, Daniel walked her through every clause with patience. "You're never signing anything again without understanding every line," he told her, looking her straight in the eye. "You are no longer a background character in your own life, Olivia. You're running the show now." She smiled in gratitude. And at the end of the second week, she opened her first bank account exclusively in her name. For the first time since the agreement with Logan, she felt like part of her future was beyond his reach. Meanwhile, Logan was watching all of this without really knowing how to process it. He saw the photos on the brand's social media, saw Olivia glowing under the California sun, wearing colors he had never seen on her, smiling in a way he had never been the reason for. He saw men and women around her, professionals, creative, focused. He read comments calling her magnetic, unforgettable, Ingrid Ryan's new muse. And as he watched, he started to feel something he had no idea how to handle. First, he tried to ignore it, buried himself in meetings, threw himself into mergers and negotiations, stretched his office hours even longer. Then he tried to rationalize. It's just work. It'll fade. Then he tried to control it, sent flowers, expensive jewelry, invitations to dinners in high-end restaurants. She declined every single one, politely, but declined. "Thank you, Logan. I can't right now. Sorry, I already have plans. Maybe another time." She didn't explain herself, didn't apologize. She simply drew lines, and that tore apart his logic. For the first time, Logan couldn't predict his own wife's next move. He couldn't control her, couldn't buy her, and that was driving him mad. The first time he showed up unannounced on set was in New York, during a photo shoot for the second phase of the campaign. He arrived in a suit, irritated, strides sharp, tried to enter the studio, but they stopped him. "Close set," the security guard said, all professional firmness. "I'm her husband," Logan snapped. "Doesn't matter, sir. Closed list." He nearly exploded. Called Olivia. She didn't pick up. Sent her a message. She saw it but didn't reply. It was as if she were living in a world where he no longer had automatic access, and that feeling of standing on the outside was devastating. He stayed there, on the other side of the door, for long minutes, until he heard laughter from inside, laughter that included hers. It hit him like a punch. In the days that followed, Logan found himself doing things he'd never imagined, analyzing every new photo of her with obsessive focus, reading the comments as if they were market indicators, picking fights with Richard over trivial issues, drinking more than he should, asking himself why her absence hurt more than her silent presence ever had. He started to realize, without saying it out loud, that he'd ignored her for months, and now he didn't know how to live without her around. What used to be convenience now felt like an unbearable loss. He tried to call her to talk. She agreed, but their conversations were professional, polite, distant. Olivia talked about the work, about contracts, about trips, about deadlines. He talked about the company, about numbers, about the same things he always talked about. Nothing was intimate, nothing was theirs, and that tore him up from the inside out. While Logan drowned in his own emotional stiffness, Olivia was blooming. Ingrid started taking her to meetings with art directors, teaching her about branding, image positioning, negotiation. Showed her numbers, charts, strategies. Treated Olivia not as a mouthpiece, but as a future partner. "Beauty opens the door," Ingrid said in one of those meetings, "but intelligence is what keeps you in the room, and you have both." Olivia smiled, shy but proud. "I never imagined working with any of this." "I did," Ingrid replied, "on that beach. And you're just getting started." The words echoed in her mind. "You're just getting started." On one of her trips, while walking alone down a hotel hallway in Milan, Olivia suddenly realized she hadn't thought about Logan the entire day. The realization hit her like a jolt. It wasn't that she didn't care, but she no longer lived around him. She no longer waited for him to notice her. She no longer waited for him to change. For the first time, the life she had was bigger than the life he tried to control. She took a deep breath, leaned on the balcony railing, and let the European breeze brush her face. And she realized she was smiling to herself, not because of someone else, but because of her. Meanwhile, Logan sat alone in the dining room in New York, the same one where she had once prepared the risotto weeks before. He stared at the empty chair, at the extinguished candles, at the memory of something he destroyed without even noticing, and the thought that finally broke through his armor was simple and devastating. "I lost her before I even realized I had her." When he closed his eyes, he saw her in the blue bikini on the beach, and for the first time, jealousy didn't come. Fear did. Real fear. Fear that her life would keep moving without him, that she'd discover she never needed him for anything, that she wouldn't come back. And in that fear, his heart, which had always been ruled by logic and contracts, started sinking into something he had never dared to admit. He was in love. Too late to say it. Or maybe still too early for her to believe it. The house clock struck midnight, and Logan sat there alone, facing the silence that now belonged to him, not to her. A silence that announced change, and that was quietly setting the stage for the trip that would change everything. Paris. A light rain was falling over Paris when Olivia and Logan landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport. The sky was heavy and grey, as if it were carrying the weight of all the conversations they still hadn't had. The flight had been quiet, not hostile, just thick with tension. Logan had spent almost the entire time going over merger documents, tweaking slides in the presentation, reviewing numbers. Olivia had sat by the window, watching the clouds drift past, feeling as if she were floating away from her own life. Paris was supposed to be romantic, but for them, in that moment, it was just necessary. The black car took them to the luxury hotel where the merger team was staying. The lobby was massive, with golden chandeliers and polished marble floors. Elegant people rushed by, carrying folders and contract binders, like love was nothing more than a myth tourists liked to believe in. Richard Torres was waiting. He stood as soon as he saw Logan, stretching out his hand with calculated formality. "Finally," he said, giving Olivia a quick glance. It wasn't openly hostile, but there was judgment there, as if she were an inappropriate accessory for a corporate event. "We have a lot to sort out before dinner." "And we will," Logan replied, shaking his hand. "But Olivia is going to rest. It was a long trip." Richard smiled, that polite smile of his that always hid something. "Of course, I understand." Then, with a soft note of irony, "Having the wife around always makes the signing photos more presentable." Olivia felt her stomach twist, but stayed quiet. She'd learned over the months that Richard never chose his words at random. Each one was placed with intention. And after his carefully curated plan had slipped out of his control in Miami, she knew very well he saw her as a threat. Her career certainly didn't help reinforce the polished corporate image Richard was trying to sculpt for Logan. But she didn't look away. She simply greeted him with a polite nod. And somehow, that seemed to irritate him even more. The hotel room was huge, with a view of the Eiffel Tower in the distance. Olivia opened the window, letting in the cold night air, laced with the smell of rain, wet concrete, and a city very much alive. Behind her, Logan was straightening his tie for the business dinner. He looked elegant as always, the dark suit shaping his rigid posture. But there was something different about him that night, a kind of exhaustion he couldn't quite hide. "You don't have to go," he said, fingers at his tie, not looking at her. "If you'd rather stay, rest, I'd understand." Olivia turned to him. "You asked me to come. You said you needed my presence to reinforce the image of stability." She adjusted her earrings, but her voice stayed calm. "I'm going." He finally looked at her. For a moment, just a moment, his eyes held something she couldn't quite read. Worry? Fear? Doubt? It was like he wanted to say something, but just didn't know how. As always, he swallowed the words. "Thank you," was all he said, and they left together. The restaurant chosen for the team dinner was one of the most exclusive in the city. Candle-lit tables, porcelain plates, waiters standing with flawless posture. The guests were already there, senior executives, lawyers, international directors. As Olivia walked into the dining room, she felt eyes slide over her, some curious, some judgmental, some quietly appreciative. She was used to being invisible. Now, for the first time, it was impossible not to notice her, and that clearly bothered Richard. As soon as they sat at the main table, he started his usual round of passive-aggressive remarks. "Olivia, I've heard you've been traveling quite a bit lately," he said with a polished smile. "Modeling, right? That must be exhausting, putting yourself out there that much." She smiled back, polite but steady. "Actually, it's refreshing. Creative work, kind people, light atmosphere, nothing exhausting about it." Richard's eyes narrowed. Logan's brow furrowed. "And you, Logan?" Richard asked, serving himself some wine. "It must be challenging to split your focus between your wife's career and the merger. I hope it's not affecting your performance." The jab was obvious. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. But Logan replied almost instantly, "My performance is fine, thanks. Olivia's work doesn't interfere with it." Richard smiled, a tight smile with poison in it. "Good to see you still know your place then," he said, this time looking directly at Olivia. Right there beside him, silent support is crucial for a man in his position. Silence. It sliced through the air like a blade. The wine suddenly felt heavier in the glass. The air grew thick. Olivia slowly set her fork down. She felt something burn inside her. Indignation, shame, and a quiet anger she had never let herself feel so openly in that kind of setting. Logan looked at Richard, then at Olivia, and everyone at the table waited for his reaction, but Logan said nothing, not then, and that silence was the most painful hit of the night. Back at the hotel, the tension blew up the moment the door closed behind them. Olivia tossed her purse onto an armchair and stepped away, breathing hard. "Good to see you know your place," she repeated, her voice trembling but firm. "That's what he said. And you didn't say anything, Logan." He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair, clearly on edge. "I didn't want to start a scene in front of everyone," he said. "But it's fine for them to put me down right in front of you," she shot back. "It's fine for them to treat me like a prop, a decorative wife." He shut his eyes, jaw tightening. "Olivia, please." "No," she cut in. "Don't say please. Talk. Just once in your life, talk. What do you want? Why am I here? Why did you bring me? Why didn't you say anything when he humiliated me?" Logan opened his eyes. And for the first time since she'd met him, he looked vulnerable. "Because I don't know how to handle this," he said, his voice low, almost broken. She froze. Was that fear, guilt, shame? Logan took a small step back, like he needed physical space to let the truth out. "I was raised not to feel," he admitted. "Not to show it, to be impenetrable. My father always said emotion was weakness. Richard spent years reinforcing that, and when you came along, I didn't know how to—" He clenched his fist. "How to deal with anything that wasn't under my control." Olivia's breath caught in her chest. "I treated you like a contract," he went on, his voice rough and honest. "Because that's what I know how to do, negotiate, make deals, control outcomes. And when I saw you, on that beach, smiling, being seen by another man, He exhaled sharply like he was confessing something forbidden. "I felt something I'd never felt before, something that scared me." Olivia moved a little closer, as if watching something rare and fragile come apart. "What did you feel?" she asked in a whisper. Logan lifted his eyes, and the mask finally dropped. "Fear," he said. "Fear of losing you." Then he corrected himself. "Fear of never really having had you at all." The silence between them changed shape. It wasn't hostility anymore. It was truth, raw truth that hurt going in, but at last began to fill the emptiness. She took a breath, feeling tears that didn't fall but glistened at the edge of her eyes. "Logan," she murmured. He took a step toward her, then another, until he was close enough for her to feel his breath. "I ruined everything," he said, his voice shaking. "And I know I did. I know I made you feel invisible. I know I didn't defend you at that dinner. I know I didn't give you space to exist. I was busy trying to be someone Richard approved of, someone unreachable, indestructible." "And who are you now?" she asked, her voice unsteady. He lifted his hand slowly, as if asking for permission to touch her. "Now, I want to be the man who looks at you and actually sees you." The tips of his fingers brushed her cheek. "The man who should have seen you from the start." Her chest tightened. "I was so tired of being ignored," she confessed barely above a whisper. "So tired of talking to walls." Logan stepped even closer. "I know. And I'm talking to you now. No contract, no terms, no excuses, just me." She closed her eyes for a second, and in that one breath of distance, The truth finally took shape between them. Not as an excuse, but as a meeting point. Logan cupped her face with both hands, slow and careful, like he was afraid she might break, and for the first time, Olivia didn't pull away. He pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything I did, for everything I never knew how to do, for everything I refused to feel." She opened her eyes, and she saw him. Not the CEO, not the Iron Man, not the walking contract. She saw the man, vulnerable, flawed, real. The first kiss happened right there. No rush, no performance, no script. It wasn't born from obligation, but from surrender. He held her face like he was holding a revelation. She slid her hands over his chest, feeling a heart that for the first time wasn't beating out of duty, but out of love. When they pulled apart, they were both breathless, but not lost. For the first time, everything made sense. Logan drew her into his arms, and she let him, not because it was expected, but because finally it was real. That night in Paris, the most romantic city in the world, stood as a silent witness to the first time they met, not as husband and wife on paper, but as a man and woman who, for the very first time, were choosing each other. When they fell asleep, tangled together, there were still doubts, wounds, and shadows. But there was also something new, fragile and powerful all at once. An unwritten, unsigned promise that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a different story, a real one. The flight back from Paris was quiet, but this time not because of coldness. It was a different kind of silence, dense, intimate, as if every thought carried new layers of meaning. Logan seemed lighter and at the same time more restless, like someone who had finally leaned against a door he'd been avoiding for years. Olivia, on the other hand, felt strange in her own body. It wasn't normal exhaustion. It was something deeper, almost instinctive. Her chest felt heavy, her stomach churned, her mind swung between confusion and a gut feeling she couldn't name. Ever since Paris, her body had been sending small signals she still didn't know how to understand. In the taxi, Logan held her hand over the seat, something he never did. There were no witnesses, no contract, just him, just her, and the touch. "Are you okay?" he asked, watching the way she rested her forehead against the window. "Just tired," Olivia murmured, forcing a small smile. "Must be jet lag." He nodded, but his gaze stayed worried. In the days that followed, their routine shifted. Olivia woke up nauseous. Coffee, which used to be essential, now smelled like metal. Perfume made her pull back, and her emotions sat right on the surface, over tiny things, silly details, random memories. It was in the mansion's library that everything finally started to make sense. She was sitting on the soft carpet, surrounded by fabric samples Ingrid had sent over for campaign approval. Sunlight streamed in through the window, bathing the room in a gentle golden glow. But Olivia felt strangely detached, like she was watching the scene from somewhere outside herself. When she stood up too fast, the world spun. She grabbed onto the bookshelf, and the thought hit her like a silent lightning bolt. No, impossible, not now, but her body was saying something else entirely. With trembling hands, she grabbed her bag, went downstairs like someone fleeing a ghost, and quietly asked Eleanor to call the driver. She didn't explain. She couldn't. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it filled the whole house. She went alone. Not to a clinic, not to an expensive private office. She slipped into an ordinary corner drugstore where no one would recognize her. She bought 2 tests, afraid to be wrong, terrified to be right, and went to the hotel she usually stayed at during work trips in New York. She booked a room for a few hours. She needed silence, needed not to exist for anyone. The bathroom smelled like plain soap and warm steam. Her hands shook so much she almost dropped the test. The instructions said to wait 5 minutes, but the answer came sooner than that. 2 lines. Pink. Undeniable. Olivia brought a hand to her mouth, her breath trapped, her soul suspended. A baby, a child, his child. She sat down slowly on the cold bathroom floor, back against the wall, the test clenched between her fingers. She didn't know whether to cry from fear, from shock, or from an unspoken love that was already forming without permission. Her first thought was, Logan is going to think this is a trap. The second, he's going to try to control this, use it. And the third, deeper, more wounded, am I going to disappear again? She covered her face with her hands and cried quietly. It wasn't despair, exactly. More like an explosion of everything. Paris, that first real night. The fear of sliding back into silence, the strength she'd been building, the heavy carriage she'd been pulling ever since the contract. And now, there was another heart, in the middle of it all. Tiny, fragile, dependent. When she finally stood up, hours later, her eyes were still swollen, but there was a calm kind of resolve in her chest. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't make up stories. She needed to tell him. She needed to face whatever came next. That night, Logan was in the library reading a report when Olivia walked in. He looked up and smiled, a small, real smile, not automatic. "You disappeared today," he said. "I was worried." She didn't answer. She walked up to the desk in silence and set the pregnancy test down on top of the open report. Logan's eyes widened, first with confusion, then alarm. He picked up the test carefully like it was made of crystal. It took a few seconds for the reality to sink in. 2 lines, positive, his whole world shifted right there. No warning, no roadmap. "Olivia," he whispered, voice breaking. "Is it?" She just nodded and waited for the storm. But the storm never came. The mask fell. His chest opened. And Logan Bennett, the man who never allowed himself to feel, brought his hands to his face, drew in a shaking breath, and cried. He cried like someone being handed a second chance. He cried like someone who'd found something he didn't know he was searching for. He cried like a boy who'd been forced to be a man too early. Then he dropped to his knees in front of her, something he had never done, and placed his trembling hands over her stomach, still flat. "Thank you," he said, smiling through tears. "Thank you for this, for giving me something I never thought I could have." Olivia hadn't expected that, hadn't expected emotion, hadn't expected tenderness. And the surprise shook her more than she'd ever admit. He pulled her into a hug, protective, desperate, grateful. And for the first time, there was no contract between them, only life. The days that followed felt like they belonged to an entirely different reality. Logan cancelled meetings, put trips on hold, started keeping track of everything, her meals, her rest, her morning nausea. He read articles about pregnancy, watched videos, downloaded apps. He walked around the house as if he were carrying an invisible treasure. He was clumsy, over the top, on edge, but he was sincere. Olivia felt like she'd stepped into unfamiliar territory. Part of her was moved, part of her pulled back, unsure how much of this was real and how much could collapse overnight. Still, there were moments when hope flickered, small but present. Shared dinners, light conversations, his hand finding hers on the couch, things that had never existed before, and now were quietly, unmistakably there. And then there was Ingrid. When Olivia told her the news, the businesswoman didn't recoil, quite the opposite. Her smile lit up the office. "Then we're going to adjust the schedule," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "No exhaustion, no rushing. You are the top priority now, and when you're ready, we'll launch a maternity resort line inspired by you. Not because it's trendy, but because you inspire women." Olivia smiled, unable to hide how touched she was. Ingrid didn't see her as a problem. She saw her as power. But while Olivia grew brighter, Richard sank deeper into the dark. He watched as Logan slipped away from his influence, watched the coldest CEO he knew become more human, and therefore weak in his eyes. Watched Olivia gain visibility, respect, attention, and all of that shattered the image he'd spent years building. Logan, molded in his own likeness. A famous wife, a public pregnancy, an emotional narrative that could pull focus from the deal. To Richard, that was a threat that needed to be removed. He started tracing their steps, digging through records, reaching out to contacts in the media, piecing together a twisted version of the contract marriage, with numbers, old documents, details only he had access to. He didn't just want to hurt Olivia, he wanted to break Logan from the inside out. He wanted his control back. He wanted to prove that feelings were indeed weakness. And the perfect opportunity came in the form of a certain corporate gossip column, one that fed on scandals involving CEOs. Richard smiled to himself in his office, lit only by the cold glow of the computer screen. Olivia Carter was becoming too strong, too visible, too independent, and for those who live off manipulating shadows, too much light is always a danger. The decision was made right there, and in the hours that followed, their world would never be the same again. The morning was quiet in the mansion. Not the usual empty kind of quiet, but the kind that comes right before everything falls apart. Olivia was in the baby's room, reorganizing tiny clothes that had just arrived in the mail. Soft, neutral pieces, picked with care. The sunlight fell gently on the freshly painted wall, casting golden reflections over the crib that was still empty. For a moment, that room felt like a promise of the future, a simple future, a possible future. She rested a hand over her belly, now softly rounded, and smiled to herself. It was one of the first mornings she actually felt safe. Then her phone buzzed, a news notification. Then another, and another, and another. The screen lit up with a headline that turned her entire body to ice. Exclusive. The $1 million contract that bought a marriage, and the truth about CEO Logan Bennett's perfect wife. Olivia felt her heart stop. Her hands shook, the air vanished. She tapped the article. The page loaded slowly, like the world itself was dragging its feet to deliver the blow. And then, line by line, Olivia watched the past she'd tried so hard to bury, being thrown out into the world as cruel entertainment. Internal sources confirmed that the marriage was the result of a financial agreement. Debts left by the late Mr. Carter. Olivia's brother, Ryan, was allegedly used as leverage in the deal. In exchange for paying off the debts and covering the young man's full medical tuition, Olivia agreed to marry the CEO. Sources claimed that Logan Bennett, under investor pressure to project a stable family image, accepted the arrangement with no emotional involvement. Now, with the recent pregnancy, some board members are asking, coincidence or strategy? The last line went down like poison. Olivia couldn't breathe. Her vision blurred, the words tangled together, too painful to read, yet impossible to look away from. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a call. Ryan. She answered with trembling fingers. Olivia? His voice was broken, choked. Is it true? Is all of this true? She closed her eyes, feeling her knees weaken. Ryan, please, listen to me. It's not like that. I'm a fraud, he shouted, something she had never heard from him. Everyone is talking. Classmates, professors, even my supervisors asked if I bought my spot with your marriage. Olivia's throat burned. I did this for you, so you wouldn't have to. I didn't ask you to, Ryan sobbed, each sound slicing into her. I would have dropped out before letting you go through this. I don't want any of it. I don't want this money. I don't want to be the reason you're being humiliated. Ryan, I'm dropping out. I can't stay there. I can't. No! Olivia finally shouted, her voice cracked and desperate. Please, don't do that. But the call ended, and her world went down with the signal. Olivia let the phone slip from her hand and collapsed to her knees on the soft nursery rug. The tiny clothes scattered around her like pieces of something she no longer knew if she'd have the strength to protect. The sobs came hard, the kind that aren't just sadness, but guilt, fear, and helplessness built up over months. She wrapped her arms around her belly as if she could shield the baby from all that invisible violence. "I'm so sorry," she whispered between sobs. "I'm so sorry." That was how Logan found her. He had seen the same headline in the car on the way to a meeting. And for the first time in his life, he cancelled an appointment without thinking twice. Adrenaline drove him all the way back to the mansion. When he walked into the nursery and saw Olivia on the floor, crying like her world had ended, something inside him shifted forever. "Olivia." His voice cracked as he moved toward her. She lifted her tear-streaked face, eyes in shock. "I ruined everything," she whispered. "I ruined Ryan. I ruined you. I ruined our daughter." "No," he cut in, dropping to his knees beside her. "You didn't ruin anything. The person who did this wasn't you." She shook her head, desperate. "They know everything, Logan. Everything, even about the contract. They dragged Ryan into it, said I used him, said I got pregnant just to trap you." Logan's expression hardened, not with coldness this time, but with a quiet, concentrated fury, like a man who had just seen the enemy clearly for the first time. "I know who did this," he said, voice low, firm, lethal, "and I'm going to end him." Olivia sobbed, but he went on. "Before that, I'm dealing with Ryan." He grabbed his phone. "He needs you calm right now. I'll take care of him." He called immediately. 3 minutes later, Ryan picked up, his voice still tight and raw. "Ryan," Logan said, straight to the point, "you're going to listen to what I have to say, and you're not going to hang up." "I don't want some corporate speech. This isn't corporate," Logan cut him off. "It's family. You are one of the brightest guys I've ever met. Everything you've achieved is yours. Your work, your effort. Nothing in that article defines you. Nothing in it erases your talent. And you are not walking away from your life because of some coward who doesn't even have the guts to show his face." Silence on the other end, full of barely contained tears. "I'll fix this," Logan said. "And I won't let anyone use your name or Olivia's for any kind of narrative. Do you hear me?" "Yeah," Ryan answered, voice wavering. "Good. Now go back to class and leave the rest to me." When he hung up, Logan turned to Olivia and gently took her face in his hands. "I promise you," he said, looking at her like he never had before, "I'm going to make this right. You and our daughter come first, above any contract, above any company, above the Bennett name." She didn't answer. She just wrapped her arms around him, clutching his shirt in a desperate grip, and Logan felt, for the very first time, that his family was under attack, and he would do anything to protect them. 15 minutes later, the war began. Logan called Daniel Brooks, his personal lawyer, not the company's, and together they launched their counterattack. Within minutes, access logs, internal records, information flows, and system reports were being pulled and analyzed. And the truth surfaced like an open wound. The leak was internal. The leak was calculated. The leak came from someone with full access to the contract. The leak was Richard. Daniel brought the evidence, logs showing Richard's access to the documents, emails sent to journalists from masked accounts, recovered audio from phone calls, encrypted messages traced back to him. Logan felt his blood boil. "Call the board," he said, voice razor-sharp. "We're removing him today." The emergency board meeting took place that afternoon in the top conference room of the company's headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows framed the city below, small and distant, while inside the room the air was tight as a pulled wire. Richard walked in, confident, arrogant, smug. "Logan, I know you're shaken by this media circus, but dragging the entire board in here over tabloid noise." Logan dropped a full dossier on the table. Evidence. All of it. Then he spoke, not as CEO, not as partner, but as a man betrayed at the deepest point of his life. His words were sharp, precise, lethal. By the time he finished, Richard was pale, exposed, and cornered. He tried to argue, to twist things, to threaten. None of it worked. The board voted unanimously. Richard Torres was removed on the spot. Security escorted him to the elevator, and the doors closed with a hard metallic click, ending the career of a man who truly believed he was untouchable. Logan stayed in the room for a moment, staring out over the city below, finally able to breathe. He thought of Olivia. He thought of the baby. He thought of the family forming around him, not out of strategy, but out of love. And he knew there was no going back. When he returned home that night, Olivia was in bed, curled around a pillow, exhausted from crying. He walked over and sat down beside her. "It's done," he said gently. "Richard is out. For good. And the legal team is suing the outlet that ran the story. You are not going to carry this as guilt. Not ever again." She looked up at him, eyes red, voice small. "And you? Won't this hurt you?" "It might." He gave a faint, crooked smile. "But I'd rather lose investors than lose you." Her eyes filled again. Logan pulled her into his arms in a way he'd never done before. Not like an owner. Not like a negotiator, but like a man, like a father, like someone who had finally chosen love. Olivia rested her forehead against his chest and closed her eyes. And in that moment, through tears, fear, and redemption, she realized, even in the middle of the scandal, even with the world crashing down around them, a new story was being written in the quiet of that night. A story that didn't have a name yet, but already had something precious to protect. The days after the scandal felt like an emotional tide, highs and lows, moments where they could breathe and others where their chests tightened. But slowly, and in a way no one really expected, life began to find a new rhythm inside the mansion. A rhythm no longer dictated by fear, silence, or constant surveillance, but by transformation. And transformation has its own timing. Olivia was 6 months pregnant when the house began to sound different. It was no longer the hollow echo of long corridors or the distant noise of conference calls. It was something softer, slower footsteps, Logan's constant presence, conversations that started shy and ended calm. He had changed so deeply that sometimes even he seemed surprised by it. The old Logan, the man of steel, was predictable. Targets, reports, mergers, control. The new Logan woke up before sunrise to make her breakfast, even though most days she could barely manage lemon water. He read articles about pregnancy, asked about symptoms, and touched her belly with the tenderness of someone holding the whole world. And unlike what she'd feared, there was no control. There was presence, there was care, there was vulnerability. It felt strange to Olivia, and at the same time incredibly comforting. One night she was sitting on the couch, rubbing her belly, when the baby kicked harder than usual. She called Logan. He came running, like he'd been called to an emergency, and laid his hand on her stomach. The movement came again. He froze, and his eyes filled with tears so fast that Olivia lost her breath. "Did you feel that?" she asked, smiling. "I did," he murmured, voice breaking. "My God, Olivia. It's real. She's really real." She touched his face gently. And in that moment she realized the man in front of her was not the same man who had signed that contract months ago. He was someone else now. Someone learning how to love. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Ingrid kept in close touch from a distance, respecting Olivia's limits, adjusting schedules, sending gifts, fabrics, handwritten notes. On one visit, she brought flowers and bags filled with small pieces from a new maternity resort collection. "I want you to look at these when you're ready," Ingrid said, setting the bag on the table. "No rush. Motherhood doesn't put who you are on pause," she smiled. "It just expands you." Olivia squeezed her hand, grateful. Ingrid wasn't just a businesswoman. She was a rare kind of mentor, someone who saw beyond the obvious and didn't romanticize pain, but never dismissed it either. As for Ryan, he was better. After the hard conversation with Logan, the truth being faced head-on, and the repair that followed, he went back to school with a different kind of maturity. He visited his sister on weekends, studied near her, showed her his notes, laughed at the baby's dramatic kicks, building a natural, easy bond with Olivia's new chapter. And then one day, something unexpected happened. Logan asked Daniel Brooks to come over for a meeting, not at the office, but at the house. Olivia was upstairs when she heard their voices downstairs, low and serious, but steady. A few minutes later, Logan came up, carrying an envelope. "What's that?" she asked, curious. He handed her the envelope, his hands trembling just a little. "It's the termination of the old contract," he said, looking her straight in the eye. "Official, signed, filed, no conditions, no strings attached." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "It doesn't make sense anymore," he replied, his voice full of quiet honesty. "You don't owe me anything. Ryan doesn't owe me anything. I've already set up an education fund for him, but this time there's no trade, no price, no chains." Olivia opened the envelope, and there it was, the formal cancellation of the agreement, the legal end of the contract that had shaped her life for months. She brought a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. "Logan, why?" He exhaled slowly, like her question had pushed open a door inside him. "Because I don't want you to stay with me out of obligation, or guilt, or fear." He rested a hand on her belly. "Not even because we're having a daughter. I want you to stay because you want to. And if one day," he drew in a breath, "if one day you decide to leave, there will be nothing holding you here, nothing except what we feel." She stayed quiet for a long time, holding the paper, trying to process what it truly meant. Then she said, "I don't want to leave." He closed his eyes in relief. "But I needed to have the choice," she added. This time he smiled, a real smile, open and vulnerable and deeply human. When Maya decided to come into the world, it was in the middle of the night, a soft, rainy night, much like the one when everything first started to change. Olivia felt the pain build in her lower back and called for Logan. He jumped up like he'd been training for this moment his entire life, guiding her to the car, holding her hand, whispering that everything would be okay, even though he was terrified inside. At the hospital, the team moved quickly. Labor was not easy. There was pain. There was fear. There were tears. But there was something majestic, too, the birth of a new story. When Maya's cry echoed through the room, the world seemed to stop. Logan covered his face with his hands, as if the weight of his whole life had crashed down on him all at once. Exhausted, Olivia received their daughter in her arms, feeling the small, perfect warmth of the body she'd carried for months. "She's," Olivia began, but couldn't finish. Logan leaned closer and gently touched their daughter's tiny head with shaking fingers. "She's the beginning of everything," he whispered, overwhelmed. Olivia looked at him, and she saw the same man who had cried when he found out she was pregnant. The same man who had gone to war with Richard, the man who walked away from contracts, control and masks, the man who allowed himself to break so he could start again. And for the first time in her life, she felt whole. The months that followed were full of small miracles. The mansion finally stopped being a home. It no longer matched the life they were building. They sold it and moved into a smaller, cozier house with a garden, sunlight, the smell of wood, and walls that echoed laughter, not silence. Mrs. Lewis went with them, almost like an honorary grandmother to Maya. Olivia went back to work with Ingrid, but on her own terms. The maternity resort line was released, inspired by Olivia's pregnancy, by the colors she wore, by the strength she carried. It was a success. Logan was involved, not as a controller, but as a quiet investor, advisor, and admirer. He liked to sit next to her, look over spreadsheets, listen to her decisions. He was proud of the woman she had become, a woman who, deep down, had always been there, but whom he was only now learning to truly see. Ryan came over whenever he could. Helped take care of Maya, watched shows with Olivia, talked through cases from med school with Logan, who treated him like real family, not out of obligation, but by choice. And one sunny afternoon, months later, while they were all out in the yard, Maya in Olivia's arms, Logan sitting on the grass with them, something unexpected happened. Olivia looked at him and said with a soft, teasing smile, "Sometimes I think, if you hadn't had that ridiculous, jealous meltdown in Miami, none of this would exist." He laughed, running a hand through his hair. "That was pathetic. I was completely out of my mind." "You were," she agreed. "But it was necessary. That was the moment everything wrong came to the surface. The beginning of the end. And the beginning of something else." He looked at her with deep affection. "I love you," he said, simple, effortless, like a truth that had been sitting there for a long time, just waiting to be spoken. Olivia closed her eyes for a second, then answered, "I love you too." There was no contract in that sentence, no debt, no fear. It was love, real, built slowly, learned the hard way, lived for real. And as Maya slept in her arms, the soft breeze of the garden brushing through the baby's fine hair, Olivia realized that in the end, their whole story, with all its pain, ruptures and scars, had never truly been about contracts or jealousy. It had always been about being seen, and finally she was. When Olivia was finally seen, it wasn't by the world, the cameras, or the contracts. It happened there, in that simple garden, with Maya sleeping in her arms and Logan sitting beside her with no mask on, that the story truly changed. The marriage that started as a transaction ended as a choice. The girl who sold her own freedom to save her brother became the woman who chose, consciously, to stay. And maybe the question that lingers is this: how many times in our own lives do we accept being invisible when we were born to be seen? If this story touched you at any point, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening from? Your support is what allows us to keep bringing stories like this, about pain, new beginnings, and real love.